After the end of World War One, there became a very constant, very persuasive almost, but persistent myth in Germany that the German army really had never been beaten in the field, that it had never really been truly defeated, that no matter what the Allies did, they had never beaten the German army. Not completely true. First of all, not completely true if you look at the real history, of course, on the German army, what was going on, especially at the end of it, and become sort of a more war of maneuver in some cases. But we're not going to get into sort of the history of that. But back to their original stab in the back myth, because that's what it became known as. They were stabbed in the back. Well, who stabbed them in the back? Well, ultimately, it became, the civilians. It was the home front. It was the socialists that stabbed them in the back. And then, of course, eventually, good old, Mr. Hitler came along and started warping that myth even more to suit his own ideas and whatnot. And I'm sure we all remember what happened next. But in now what has been a very, very serious defeat for the Conservative Party, and we have been going over a couple of, what went wrong articles from very different people in the Conservative Party. There has been no overall consensus on really, getting to grips like this is why we lost. It's all a bit airy-fairy, grasping at straws in an attempt to try and say, our part of the party was what was right. But of course, there are other conservatives saying some other things that haven't, shall we say, written long blogs to say what went wrong, and we're going to sort of just collate some of these things about what they've been saying and show you that they are now trying to construct their own stab in the back myth to try and excuse why they lost. And bear in mind, if they fall down this rabbit hole of, myth conspiracy building that some of them are actively engaged in, they ain't going to be power for some time. And that is a very good thing, by the way. That is a very good thing that they are not going to be in power. But it just goes to show you how crazy all this is going to be. And as I've said, why we'll be covering it, because it will just be at some points. I think there are going to be some things that are going to be said, certainly over the next coming months, weeks, and years, that are just going to be too good not to cover. So, as always, before we do go getting into sort of the rest of this, please remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there's the Buy Me Coffee link. There's the YouTube thank you button. And of course, as always, there is the Pony Club as well down below. You can always click on the like and share button as well. And as always, thank you very much to everyone who does help and support the channel. So, on then with this. So, to begin with, you have to understand various different people are saying various different things. So there's no currently, shall we say, at the moment, one unifying mythos, but there is one narrative slightly forming. Well, we obviously have to include Nadine Dorris in this, but one myth, of course, is very, very much becoming the Boris myth. This is absolutely, and I kid you not, one that is absolutely forming. So currently, the Boris myth goes that if COVID had never happened, because you remember in a lot of the things that we've covered, they've blamed the COVID lockdowns. But if COVID had never happened, this defeat would have never have happened. Like all, the drama, etc. That would have never have happened, and Boris would have seen us through to another election victory. Bear in mind, the day before the election, who do these very, very desperate conservatives reach out to They reach out to Boris Johnson in the vain hope, that somehow he's still got that sprinkling of electoral magic. But you've got to go back to this myth building, this idea that if COVID had never happened, you can't think like that. You've got to admit that COVID happened. You've got to admit COVID happened. It happened. Partygate happened. The chaos in and around Boris Johnson also happened. Chris Pincher, the scandal, that happened as well. Just so many other scandals that happened in and around Boris Johnson that weren't even, even if you take Partygate and etc. out of, would have embroiled him. And even if Boris Johnson had stayed on, do you think there would not have been more scandals? Absolutely, there would have been more scandals to come. So the big part of this myth is that if they had kept Boris Johnson, everything would be fine. We should have just rode the Johnson Tiger straight into what would have been another, great election victory. And I kid you not, that is one of the narratives that is going around. Now, I did mention, of course, Nadine Dorries. Nadine Dorries, of course, you may remember, writer of The Plot. But she certainly lost the plot some time ago. She wrote the whole thing about, the struggle to sort of oust Boris Johnson, that, that part of the party was going to be ejected and there was a conspiracy around it. Well, some people recently, as you may have heard about the skirmish around the 1922 committee, some are now saying that this is all part of this Boris Johnson plot, that those people who ousted Boris Johnson are now aligning themselves and have elected their people into the 1922 committee so that they can keep out people like Boris Johnson, like anyone else who might lead the party to such a great victory once again. And yet, this is one of the narratives that has been forming. This whole Boris saga. And maybe Boris does return one day to frontline politics. That is not beyond the realm of possibility. But I think at the moment, maybe he won't be the next election, but maybe the one after. Maybe 2035, 2034. Maybe that's when we'll see Boris Johnson return to frontline politics. But make no mistake, in these sort of conservative civil wars, Boris Johnson is firmly going to be playing some sort of role in the fights and the arguments to come, because he is going to be certainly in the non-parliamentary Conservative Party, but he is going to act like some sort of vengeful, angry god, hurling thunderbolts at whoever dare question his tenure. Ultimately, see, I was right all the time. Ha ha. Don't think so there, Boris. But this is just one of the many narratives that are now forming. One of the ones you are seeing, which many people on the left are also bizarrely co-opting, that Labour didn't win, the Conservatives lost. I'm sorry to upset you. Labour did win. They won over 400 seats. Sorry, but that's our electoral system. That's the system we're in. If you win that many seats, you sort of win, you sort of win the contest. You win the general election. And of course, at the moment, the Conservatives are coping. So at least they've got some sort of excuse. We can just say, well, they're coping about their loss. But the lefties doing this are doing purely so because, unfortunately, Corbyn, but I would say using this excuse makes Jeremy Corbyn look really, really bad. Because if Labour can win this many seats on a smaller vote share than Jeremy Corbyn, sort of really goes to show you that what I've been saying for quite a while has been right. Jeremy Corbyn wasn't that good a leader. So anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching. I'm sure you've probably seen other Conservatives sort of start the myth mill pumping out as to why they lost as well. But don't get me wrong, the whole Boris myth is certainly, I think, going to become a very attractive excuse for the Conservatives to sort of go down. So watch out for that, because it will, I can guarantee you, certainly play a part in that. So as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.